and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show, brought to you by ProgressiveChristianity.org. We hope that you will follow us on social media. And today we will be talking about Moon Knight and hope that you will maybe ask some questions wherever you're watching, and we'll address those later in the show. I'm here today with my good buddy, Mark. How you doing today, Mark?
Hello, Caleb. I am doing quite well. I'm excited to talk about this. So I've been gearing up for the last 24 hours, getting excited about being able to do this live with you. This is great.
Yes, and I bet part of that gearing up has been preparing a special drink for today.
Indeed.
What are you drinking?
I am having something called a supermoon, keeping with our theme.
Okay. Yes.
Our hero in this series, hero-esque in this series.
Yeah, hero?
Yeah, is he? Hero?
Yeah.
Is in all white, and obviously moon in the name. So I have a supermoon. This is tequila, triple sec, cream of coconut, and a little bit of lime, a little fresh lime in it. How about you, sir? What are you having?
That sounds good. So I am having a full moon martini with the same thought process here. It is rum, vodka, coconut cream. And I've got, if you're watching online, you can see a little frozen moon. There, a full moon in the center.
Perfect.
That's coconut cream and water. So, again, white and moony, just like yours.
Well played. Hey, cheers, and here's to a great show, sir.
All right.
That's pretty good.
That's right. Okay, everybody, let us know what you're drinking, and we'll see you in just a minute.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
So today we are looking at Moon Knight, and Moon Knight follows mild-mannered gift shop employee Stephen Grant, played by Oscar Isaac. It explores the struggles with dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID, and the discovery that his blackouts and mysterious memories come from sharing a body with former mercenary Mark Spector. Yeah, and among other things that the two share is this sort of psychic connection with Egyptian god Khonshu, who's the god of, surprise, the moon, also the god of vengeance, which is kind of going to play in, obviously. And so Stephen and Mark have yet another alternate identities, actually a few, hero-esque identities in the characters of Moon Knight, and we saw in episode 2, Mr. Knight. And they basically get drawn into a deadly mystery involving Egyptian gods, and their primary nemesis, Arthur Harrow, is played by Ethan Hawke brilliantly, and he's a kind of this charismatic, clever, cult-like leader who basically wants to save the world by eliminating all those people who might do a crime in the future. Like, just take them all out, right? Yeah. Like Minority Report. For those who watch them. Right.
That's exactly what I was sitting here thinking. Minority Report.
It's got it. He definitely they play from that theme, but the comic book's been around since like 75, and that was part of the theme then. So it's been around before Minority Report, based on, I think, a book which is also around for a while. So this is a theme that is played out from time to time in lots of things. So we've seen 2 episodes. What's your initial kind of reaction?
Okay, man. So I loved watching this. This was a lot of fun to watch. And it was kind of billed like in the previews, it looked kind of horror-esque. And I'm like, what's this going to be? But it kind of was, but it was also funny, and it was action-packed and fun and mysterious to watch.
Emotional, like it's very emotional.
Yeah.
Like, because a big theme, a big thing really is exploring his DID. And you do get very emotionally attached to this character who's struggling so hard, And it is, it's amazing, like how often, I can't think of a time that our hero is the one with a
Mhm.
mental disorder.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
was trying to think of that too, and I couldn't.
yeah,
I was having a hard time coming up with something, or
yeah,
and a positive kind of hero that
right.
had
And,
some kind of
and in
a
so many,
mental
in
illness. Yeah,
so yeah, in so many superhero type things, it's actually the villain, and they're villains because
right.
their mental disorder creates that. And in
Hmm.
this, we have
Yeah.
the opposite. We have a very methodical, clean kind of
Hmm.
I don't know. He's very emotionally detached, but clear
Yes.
thinking. And
It-
it's strange, right, to have this
yeah.
mentally ill hero
Yeah.
who basically is wanting to do the right thing, but can't always, and he's got this internal struggle and dialogue going all the
Right.
time. And
Right.
this sort of sane-ish villain he
Yeah.
actually sort of sees himself as a saint, doesn't he? I mean, he
Oh,
really
yeah,
does. He has a
of course
father.
he does,
Yeah,
because he I mean, he says that he's saving the world. He's the avatar, the Ethan Hawke's character is the
yeah,
avatar of another Egyptian goddess,
right.
and she's, as Mark said, the one who kind of judges before they've done anything wrong. And yeah, he says that he's trying to make Earth more like heaven, which I
Mhm.
mean is what
Wow.
in progressive Christianity we say a lot, that we want to make Earth more
Well,
like,
that's what,
this
you know,
ideal, right? And so
right.
that's what he's saying. Yeah,
Yeah. Kingdom of the God language is really a
right.
here and now language. It's not, yeah.
Uh
So it
huh.
is heaven on,
Right.
it's supposed to be heaven on earth. And that's what the bad guy, the main villain, who
Uh
isn't
huh.
mentally ill and is somewhat
Yeah.
presented as this methodically
Hmm.
sane person,
Uh huh.
that's what he wants. At least that's what
That's right.
he thinks
That's
he's
what he
doing.
says.
Yeah.
Right, right.
That's what he
Yes,
definitely thinks
yes. It
he's doing.
remains to be seen. That never works out. Quite, like uneach every time they
Right.
unearth some kind of ancient power, it's always a
Right.
disaster. What these
Yeah.
movie people learn, that don't go
Right.
unearthing ancient Egyptian stuff. It never works out well for anybody. Keep that stuff closed up. So,
Right.
yeah,
No, I
it's
absolutely agree.
interesting. And the Moon Knight character, the Steven, this kind of the one of the personalities that works in this museum gift shop.
Who's
He's
a
kind of
vegan and kind of he's a vegan
a
and
social
he's like
outcast.
nonviolent kind of like he
Non-violent,
avoid.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, doesn't want anything to do with any of that,
Mm-mm,
and
mm-mm.
he's not assertive in his life. He like wants to be a tour guide at the museum, and he's gonna have to settle for
And
working
he's
in the
kind of a
gift
loner.
shop.
He's kind of a
He's kind of a
loner, you know.
loner, no luck with girls, that kind of stuff,
Right.
and to
Yeah.
have this this alter ego where he's blacking out and save it.
Yeah.
I don't know, being a mercenary. I don't know what he's doing.
Right.
Is very
Right.
interesting.
It's
Yeah,
it's
Mark,
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if you watched the Moon Knight comics. Did you know anything about this before
I
watching
knew a
it
little bit
or
about them.
did you read it? Yeah,
I did from time to time. It's actually a very
yeah,
long running
yeah,
comic book. It's been around for quite a
yeah.
while. They've made some changes. For instance, in the comic book, it's not Steven that's the actual main character. It's
Yeah.
Mark Spector.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and they made some changes. And I should
Yeah.
say, that they're very different personalities. It's part of why
Very good.
we
Yeah.
DID, a dissociative identity disorder,
Mhm.
used to be called multiple personality disorder, and
Right.
and what we've learned is that these aren't multiples of one personality. These are very
Mhm.
different people, and
Mhm.
in Mark and Steven, we definitely have very different people,
Yeah.
and I think Oscar Isaac does just an amazing job playing these two characters. Like one's
Fantastic.
got a British accent, one doesn't. But
Yeah.
you can tell which person it is long before he talks.
Right.
And the way
Yeah.
he
Good.
carries
True.
his
He carries
body, the way
himself. Yeah.
even his eyes, like when he's Mark, there's
Mhm.
this intensity about him. And then when he's Steven, there's this calmness and almost reserve in his eyes. I mean, I think
Great
he
acting.
is
Yeah.
spectacular, spectacular in the role. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I think pulls you in even more. And it's so interesting that we have this main character, the hero character, that has a mental disorder,
Yeah.
and it is part of the theme of the show. Like that, they're not hiding
Mhm.
it. It's not like a side issue. I think we're going to learn even
No.
more and more about it in the comics.
Yeah.
They have. It's going to be interesting to see in the comics. They have more than two of the main. It's not just Stephen and Mark. There's other
Right. Others. Yeah.
persons that are in there that come out. It'll be interesting to see if they do it. But I love the fact, like you were saying, this would have been very easy to play as a very sad kind of like, oh, poor guy, and he's got this, and there's all this internal dialogue, and we get some of that internal struggle and dialogue. But it's also handled in a really great kind of comedic, like they handle it. Yeah. It's interesting that they balance this real difficult issue, but also are able to pull off the humor in a very human way. You don't feel like they're picking on the character at all in how they're addressing it.
No, and I thought it was brilliant to start from the perspective of Stephen as he's meeting his other personality, and the audience is meeting that personality too. And so, like, I had to look up Moon Knight. I knew nothing about this. I'd never read the comics. I'm like, oh, like it's Mark that's the primary person, and
but they don't seem to
Mark
be
like Stephen.
But they don't seem to. I think they flipped it in the show. I mean, I think
they
Stephen
did. Right?
is.
Yes.
He's going to remain
the primary
that
person,
right?
And
which
I think
is
that's
kind of
brilliant.
lovely. Yeah,
it is
because
we,
go ahead.
We get to see it. We get to see it from Stephen's perspective. We get to
and it also it's also beautiful. I love it. We don't get this a lot in superhero shows. The narrator, because of the way they went at this, we have this sort of unreliable narrator. Because he doesn't really know what's going on. He's trying to tell us what's going on.
Out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a wonderfully fun way of approaching this, I think. Yeah. It's just
it absolutely is. It's a fun way to approach the story. And as you mentioned earlier, Mark, it's interesting that the main character has a mental illness. And I think this is a particularly powerful time maybe to have the main character who has a mental illness whenever we're kind of coming out of this pandemic, and we've got mental illness at the forefront of our minds, right? I mean, I know that in 2020, 1 in 5 Americans were said to have had mental illness. And you know that has significantly increased as we've gone through this pandemic. And it was underreported always anyway, because there's been such a social stigma around mental illness.
Yeah, and frankly, the church is a villain in that story in terms of not being willing to talk about it and kind of pushing it to the margins and not bringing it forward and dealing with it, which is strange because in the gospel text, there are several times that mental illness is handled. They misunderstood it, but it's like this perfect opportunity for the church to be talking about it, and we'd rather not.
That's right, because a lot of people say Jesus is Lord or Savior. I like to think of Jesus as a first century mental health practitioner.
Right, there's a lot of that for sure.
I mean, that's kind of what he was out doing. I mean, in the ancient world, they understood it. Mental illness as being possessed and performing exorcisms was kind of a way of addressing that possession and the mental illness and the ancient understanding the best I could. And so Jesus goes around doing these exorcisms and speaking words of hope, right? Which mental health practitioners do, which I think is fascinating. Jesus is the first century mental health practitioner. And so churches, it's weird that churches do such a bad job of mental health. And even shy away from it. And even worse than shying away from it, they condemn people for seeking out mental health, right? You're not praying hard enough. Your faith isn't strong enough. You need to be doing better in your life if you're experiencing it. Stuff that's not biblical, to be certain, is bad theology and is bad psychology, and is just being bad people. A lot of times to condemn people for the real life struggles that they're going through is not helpful at all.
I read a little bit from the folks that are directing this. By the way, speaking of directing and everything, I love that they have brought in, instead of the way that Hollywood tends to do this, since there is an Egyptian theme in all of this, in the Egyptian gods, there's a lot of Egyptian actors, authentic, like real Egyptian stars and background folks. And they brought in a director, at least for 4 of the episodes, and to kind of head it up, who is a well-known Egyptian director, which I kind of love that they've done that with this. I love that approach very, very much. But to go back and I read from him that they were taking the mental disorder stuff very, very seriously, and they brought in specialists to help train them so that they can address this in a healthy way and keep it on the forefront. And I love one of the quotes from Stephen, and he equates the times that Mark takes over at the body as times that are eating. He says, eating away at parts of my life like a parasite.
Wow.
And anyone who has suffered from any kind of, or dealt with any kind of mental disorder knows that is a big thing that mental disorders actually do. From depression all the way to a dissociative identity disorder, it eats away like a parasite at parts of your life. And I love that they're bringing that to the forefront. It is sad that it is a Marvel superhero show that's doing this, and not more churches and not more public figures.
Right.
But I do love that they're doing it. I do.
Wherever we can get it, Mark. You know, if it's a superhero, so be it. At least someone is talking about it. And hey, the superheroes tend to be some of our best, commentators on current events anyway.
Yeah.
And so you're right. That thought about it being like a parasite eating away at your life is such a powerful analogy. And maybe that's something for us to explore as we move into our theopolitical stuff.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought it up, and I think we should talk about it some more. But let's first take this quick break, and we'll be back on the other side.
See you then.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. Today we are talking about Moon Night, and we have been talking about how fun Moon Night is, but also how it brings to light some real-life challenges like mental illness. And so we do find out, of course, as we've discussed, that the hero of the show has dissociative identity disorder. And we've realized that mental illness is something that we really need to do a lot of work on to break the silence and to address as a society. Mark, do you have suggestions about how we do that?
I'd say right off the top of my head, there's two things we can start doing. Well, one we can do immediately just as members of society, and that's to stop villainizing mental disorders. I mean, that's the first thing. If a shooter is a white person, the first thing you're going to hear anyone wondering is what kind of mental disorder they might have. And the numbers are just not there for that. I mean, the fact is that is not the reason that most shooters, it's not directly related to any kind of mental disorder at all. So, but we tend to villainize it, and somehow that makes it okay and better. But I think the more important thing and more political thing that we've got to do is we have to readdress our healthcare system in a very strong way. The folks who suffer from mental disorders are having a harder time fitting into society, partly because of the way that society deals with mental disorders, which also frequently means that they don't always have all the resources that other folks might have. And we have a healthcare system that's very hard to get into, that it costs a lot of money to participate in. And even when you are in it and participating in it, it puts borders up and obstacles to getting proper mental health care, and keeps it. I mean, even great health care frequently doesn't pay for mental health issues the same way they pay for physical issues. So I think that's at least the beginning of it. And that requires us to be in contact with our politicians. It also requires us to be electing politicians who are willing to confront it and deal with it, right?
That's right. Recognize that it's a problem, and that we should be taking action, and that we should help to provide that health care and see it as an
Absolutely.
essential right for everybody, because we function better as a society if we're able to access that care. And you're right that there are so many, medical plans and all that, even if they cover mental health kinds of care, make it so hard to access
Yeah.
that it doesn't do very much good at all. And so
Well, and
I
they
think that, yeah.
go ahead. I
No,
didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
I think it's a tragedy, Mark.
It really is. I mean, and even like I was alluding to, even the good healthcare, that even if you're paying a reasonable amount, like unreasonable amount of money for your healthcare,
Yeah.
what you frequently see is that the copay for mental health is a lot higher than the copay for a doctor's visit. What you frequently find is that there is a limit on how much they will pay and for how many visits they will pay, which
Right.
is absolutely ridiculous. It's again,
Yep.
it's downgrading and belittling the real issue of mental disorders and saying, look, after you talk to someone for a few months, you ought to have this figured out, and not realizing what's
as
really
if it goes
going on.
away, right?
Right,
As if all
right.
of it goes away just magically. Yeah. And
Which
I
is
see.
absolutely absurd. And we have to change that. I mean, honestly, part of it is that we've, much like too many things in America, healthcare and getting healthcare is a profit business. And as long as it's a profit
Absolutely, yeah.
business, they're going to villainize certain things and try not to spend much money on it, as long as we're not shouting and saying it's not okay. I think the one way we get this fixed is a true national health plan. But if we can't get that, we have to be yelling and shouting and electing the right folks who are going to address this in a healthier way, and recognize that we're a better society if we do.
Yeah, I love that, Mark, that you're talking about universal health care, and but in ensuring that universal health care is not just about physical health, but it's about
Absolutely.
mental health too. And until we see like an integrated person, the health of a whole person as a part of what we ought to be working for when we're talking
Right.
about universal health care, we're missing the point. And so we need politicians who are able to recognize that that's a priority, and it's a right that we have as citizens. And so I think that electing people like that is important. But I think there are things that we can do, personally and as a church to help with this as well.
Right.
To
I mean,
break
one
the
of the things we
silence.
can do
Yep.
is speak out and personalize it. It's something that I've been doing for years now. I've been very open about my major depressive disorder and my generalized anxiety disorder. I try to talk about it anytime I have the opportunity to say, look,
Right.
I suffer from these things. I take medicine for it. I
Right.
talk to people to try to get it treated, and that helps normalize this. It doesn't make it this scary thing that some people that we don't know and don't understand have.
Right.
And we need more and more people, particularly people who are visible in the public, out there explaining what their issues are, what their struggles have been, and how they get treated because of it, and how they're still figuring out how to manage these things and to continue with life in a way that is satisfying for them. And I've seen it in people in my life who have struggled with getting the proper care because literally the health insurance almost prevents it, unless you've got a lot of money in your back pocket just to hand to somebody. And it's atrocious. While we're on this political segment, I did want to make sure that we touch on a different issue that is brought up, I think, in the character Arthur Harrow, in his, he basically, once again, there's all spoilers in these podcasts. He has this magic, he has this magical tattoo that when he holds people's hands, it shows if they balance towards good or evil. And then if they're evil, they just drop dead on the spot.
Yeah, that's right.
So messed
if it
up.
weighs against you, bye.
Right. It's so
No
messed up.
defense.
Right.
Yeah.
But it does bring up an issue that we touched on at the end of a recent show in terms of, we talked about it in terms of morality and who gets to define what morality is. But I think politically, and coming from this show, one of the things that would be a helpful discussion is what is good and what is evil and who gets to decide. And we try to present this as frequently, you're either good or you're either evil. And in the character of Stephen, we get this person who, when he holds the hands, the scales can't figure out what to do. Not
right,
good, not
you've
evil.
got conflict within you. Is that what he says? Yeah.
Yeah, he says you got conflict within you.
Chaos.
Somehow that means
that's what it was. Chaos.
Yes,
within
chaos.
You.
And he even hears a
And
voice
don't
that
we
tells him
all?
to embrace the chaos.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think we get trapped in this, and political parties really thrive on defining what good and bad is, and making it this very cut and dry thing somehow. I mean,
Yes.
how is it that a nation full of folks who should be more than reflective enough to recognize that even in our own lives, things aren't either good or bad; they're degrees of each.
Right.
How is it that we've allowed politicians to bilk us into believing that it's either this or that, and the other side is always bad? And who gets to decide that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I wish I had an answer. It's felt like just kind of, I don't know if it was I guess it's been a slow descent into this, but I mean, we saw a rapid descent in the election of 2016 with Donald Trump and but I think we saw it for years with the Tea Party Republicans leading up to this, as we were seeing politicians define for us what morality was, and telling us that if we didn't agree with them, we were completely morally bankrupt. And I think that most of the time they touted this as Christian belief, and it's not any kind of Christian belief that I'm familiar with. Most of the things that they say are Christian belief, I wonder if they just have a different copy of the Bible than I do. Whenever the copy of the Bible I have, it talks about welcoming the strangers. It talks about loving unconditionally. It talks about incredible hospitality. It talks about how God is love, and that's how we define God in our world, is by loving one another. And here we see a party that's mainly concerned with exclusion. And I don't know. How did we get here, Mark? You asked the question. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's all about manipulation, isn't it? I mean, even touting that it's Christian values is about manipulation.
It's manipulation. You're right.
You get.
That's
good. I think you are much kinder than I, and giving much more credit to them than I'm
Give
willing
it to me. Give it to us straight, Mark. Tell us what's really going on.
I mean, I believe that Christianity, spirituality, any kind of religion throughout history has been seen by the powerful is a great tool for leveraging people and manipulating people. And so I don't have any doubt they're 100% sure. They know that what they're saying isn't actually based on any teachings of Jesus. They don't even have to point to it. All they got to do is say, well, we think that X is the right thing because it's the Christian thing. Even if it's not, you put that word on it, too many people
it's a
will
Christian
follow.
thing. Yeah.
In that case, I'm for it.
They're right. Yeah. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to do that. So I think that's a good point in terms of how we're talking about politics. I also had the thought, like, a lot of people think the Bible is about judgment.
Right.
And is that the main point of the Bible, Mark? Separating the sheep from the goats? What do you think about that? Is that really what the Bible's about? That's what Christians
I think
to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that right?
I hear what you're saying, but I think you and I both very much recognize that the theme of the Bible is about our connectedness and how love is a full expression of that, and how we end up in a better world and a better place when what we really are doing is managing to see people for who they really are and loving them for it.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're right about that, Mark. I think that people who
I appreciate you throwing
judgment, they miss the point.
I think I appreciate you throwing me that softball.
Yeah, I'm gonna lob this one at you, Mark. What do you think about this? Okay, hey, I know that you all may have questions about this. If you have, and there's been a lot of good discussion in the comment section from the various places where you are watching this. Throw some more comments, throw some questions, and we'll talk about those when we get back from this drop.
welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're in our Q&A segment of the show. We will continue monitoring any of the comment sections. If you have thoughts, questions, throw them up there. Caleb, though, I'm going to start out with a question for you. Recognizing that we are only 2 shows in.
Yeah.
So far, what do you think is the lesson to draw from the show right now? What should we be learning right now?
Oh, that's interesting,
It's
especially since we're only 2 shows in.
Right. But I do think there's been some themes that are showing up that maybe we can learn something from.
Yeah. Okay. So I really think that the main theme is what we've been talking about in today's podcast, and that's talking about mental health and thinking about mental health and
Right.
and being familiar with yourself and acceptance of yourself. And I've appreciated seeing in the comments people being so open about their own struggles with mental health. And I think that any time that we can say, you know what, it's okay to be who you are, to bring who you are, that's a powerful thing. And I think whenever church communities are able to embody that, that's so powerful, especially after what we were talking about earlier about how religious communities do such a bad job of that whenever we
Right.
find a church community that does a good job, that man, that is liberating. And so
Yeah.
my wife also struggles with generalized anxiety disorder, and one of the great blessings in my life has been that the church that we're a part of accepts her as she is, and if she can't come to church, they're like, fine, that's fine, she's doing what she needs to do. And that's beautiful whenever you find people, and as a religious community you realize that it's theological, that it's from God to accept people as they are.
Right.
That's powerful. And so
Yeah.
just because of where we are in our society, that's what I was thinking about as I was watching this. How about you?
Well,
Throw the
I
same
kind of
question
agree.
back on you.
I agree with that. That concept of accepting people for who they are is one of the main themes. As a matter of fact, I think that this allowing us in on Stephen's internal dialogue, for me, we should be picking up on this lesson of being more compassionate and recognizing that we don't know what people's internal dialogues are or how they got to these internal dialogues, and that we need to be more aware and accepting and loving of folks, recognizing that what we see outwardly isn't always the internal stresses and challenges that are going on. And I think the show does a beautiful job at pointing that out and letting us kind of see that up front and personal with our lead character.
Yeah, right. Yeah, having the perspective of the lead character is incredibly powerful. So Mark, we were also talking today about judgment and the theme of judgment in there. So how do you think we as a society confront that judgment? I don't know that we resolved that in the last segment, as we were talking about politicians that have issued a right and a wrong about everything. How do we get out of that? How do we move forward past that?
Well, I mean, I think it comes back again to more public dialogue about being compassionate and recognizing the struggles that we all have. And the more that we get to see the parts of us that we struggle with and recognize that other people have that in them as well, it makes it easier for us to look at them and be compassionate about what they're going through. Even someone who we might not know what's actually going on, but we see them acting out in aggressive ways or acting out in a different way where they shut down and internalize stuff and seem removed from society. If we can have more dialogue and more public celebration of being compassionate, I think that's our first step towards being less judgmental. And it goes back to also our look at, is there good and bad? I mean, I think part of our judgment is about that we think that this is a very clean cut, that one thing's good and one thing's bad, rather than being able to recognize that it all happens on a spectrum. and that
Yeah.
we shouldn't be judging because we don't almost never fully understand the story behind it. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that's biblical too.
Indeed.
I think that the Bible is more about ambiguity than certainty, which
Absolutely.
strikes me as ironic because in modern American Christianity, we've wanted to make Christianity and the Bible, religion in general, all about certainty, and it's
Mm,
not. It's
yeah.
about embracing the mystery. It's about recognizing that there are some things that we can't know, that our best descriptions of that great divine beyond us are always just limited to our own human understandings, and so that ambiguity is important, and so embracing the gray areas of life and understanding are very important. And so I think you're right, Mark, that whenever we're able to embrace that and recognize that things are complicated, that
Hmm.
life is complicated, that's a
Yeah.
theological statement to just say life is complicated. It's not always clear cut and it's not always easy. That whenever we can say that, well, that's like a prayer. I love
Yeah.
that. I've come
Absolutely.
to believe that prayers are really conversations, and
Yeah.
so I think maybe that's what we've done today, and maybe it's
I
what we'll
certainly
do
hope so.
next week. Mark, should we
Absolutely.
tell them what we're going to do
Yeah, I
next
think
week?
next week we're going to take on the movie The Adam Project. It's streaming online. I think maybe Netflix. I can't remember what. It is a show about time travel. I think there's going to be lots of opportunities to discuss some interesting topics. So everyone
And
who is yes,
we're both sci-fi nerds,
we
and
are
we were
very
both
much.
excited about watching this.
You better believe it. Very
So
much so.
yeah, that's
So
right.
we hope that
Yeah,
you're excited about it out there. If you're watching live right now
that's
or
right.
you're listening back playback
hmm
on the podcast, make sure you
Yeah,
go out, watch the Adam Project. We're going to do that
yeah.
as well this week.
hmm
If you have the time and are able to tune in on our broadcast on Mondays at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time, find a themed drink. Come and join us. Let us know. Maybe even come up with questions that you thought of while you were watching it,
Right.
and we'll
Yeah.
try to address it all and celebrate together. So, thank you all. We really appreciate your time, you tuning in, and until next time, this has been the Moonshine Jesus Show, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheers.
Moonshine Jesus,